Hi guys, it's Anna Marie. Welcome back to my channel. So I kind of disappeared and was MIA for a while off of YouTube. I was watching booktube videos and enjoying them, but I wasn't recording. And that is just simply because of life, things that are going on in the world right now. And I'm a teacher, so I do at this point have a little bit of free time. So I will be reading a lot more and hopefully uploading more videos during this time. And while the circumstances are less than ideal, I am going to have the opportunity to be more present and read a little bit more. So that is a good positive thing. And because I was not here to do a March TBR or a February wrap up, I'm going to just combine those and do both of those at the same time. So this will be a February wrap up along with a March wrap up, but obviously we're not done with March. So a couple of these books are not finished, but hopefully by the end of this week they will be finished. But I'm going to go ahead and start with the books that I read in February. I read 11 books in February, which I felt was a pretty good amount for me. The first week in February, however, was the Polathon that was hosted by JD Ray Reads, and I have a Polathon wrap-up that I've already posted, so I'm just going to show you guys the books that I read for the first week of February and not go into like my thoughts because I have a video and I'll link that down below. I have the first 3 books that I read for Polathon. The fourth, however, I do not have because I already unhauled it because I did not enjoy it. But the first one that I read for Polathon was Anya and the Dragon by Sophia Pasternak, and I know I'm butchering that last name, I'm sorry. I gave this 5 stars. The second book that I read for Polathon, I also gave 5 stars, which is Ice Wolves by Amie Kaufman. And if you don't recognize Amie Kaufman, she has written several books with Jay Kristoff. They wrote the Illuminae Files, and they have recently written the Aurora Rising series, and this is just Amie Kaufman on her own. So this is Ice Wolves. I gave that 5 stars. And then I also read The House with Chicken Legs by Sophie Anderson, and I loved this book so much. I gave it 5 stars. I've already recommended it to several people. In fact, my mom, if I can get her to read it, will hopefully pick this up and love it just as much as I did. I also read Hearts of Ice. I can't even remember the author. It was just too young for me. But I did pick that up, and those were the first 4 that I read for Polathon. And for the rest of February, I actually finished The Winter of the Witch, which is the last book in the Winternight trilogy, in February, but I didn't read it in February. Like, I finished it on the 2nd day of February, so I consider that mostly read in January. I loved the Winternight trilogy. I don't have that book with me because obviously I am in a different place. I didn't even mention that. So our setup obviously is completely different. I don't have my bookshelves with me because I'm in a different place. And so I am without all of my books, which is kind of sad, but I got most of them, or the ones that I read in February and March, here with me to show you guys. But I don't have Winter of the Witch with me. I did give it 5 stars. I think it was a really, really great conclusion to the series. That entire trilogy was just so atmospheric, and the magic was really fascinating. The next trilogy that I read was the Folk of the Air trilogy. I read The Cruel Prince in January, and I didn't love The Cruel Prince. Everybody hyped up the hate to love relationship, and for me it was just kind of abrupt. I didn't really get that relationship. There wasn't any chemistry until one point where there was so much chemistry that it was like so overwhelming, and I just didn't really get the hype for that. And then in February I read The Wicked King, which I feel so on the fence about because every booktuber that has read this series loved Wicked King and either didn't like The Cruel Prince or The Queen of Nothing, but they loved The Wicked King. And honestly, I didn't really love The Wicked King that much. I actually preferred the last one in the trilogy, which I'll get to in a minute. I just feel like this had middle book syndrome where not a lot was going on. It was just like building up to something that was gonna happen at the end of the book, which I did like the conclusion to this book, but I did start to like the main character, Jude, in this book a little bit more than I liked her. I liked that her arc was going in a different direction, and that she had a lot of personality change from the first book to the second. Like, she was starting to find herself a little bit in this book. But other than that, I just really wasn't that overwhelmed by this second book, and I feel bad because a lot of people were. But in between The Wicked King and The Queen of Nothing, I picked up another Brandon Sanderson book, because I want to read as many Brandon Sanderson books as I can this year. And at the beginning of the year and the end of last year, I read his Mistborn trilogy, and it is one of my favorites. I love that series so much. And I've heard a lot of people say that you don't need to go into Mistborn Era 2 directly after you read Era 1. So I wanted to pick up something else by Brandon Sanderson before going into Era 2. And also I want to pick up his like epic high fantasy series next, but I was kind of intimidated by that. So instead I picked up Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson, and I really loved this book. It was a different type of magic, a different type of world in the Cosmere. I love the different perspectives that we had, and I feel like the character arcs in this book were so significant. Like, they started at the beginning as someone, and then by the end they were just like completely transformed. And this is actually based off of two sisters who are from this kingdom, and they are close to being at war with another kingdom or another empire. And so in order to create peace between these two kingdoms, the king decides to send one of his daughters to be married to the god king, basically. And this one sister, the older sister, has been trained and prepared for her entire life to be sent off to be married to this man or this god king. And the other sister, who is the younger sister, she's basically just like doing her own thing. Nobody has any expectations for her. She's just the princess. And at the very last minute, the dad, and this isn't really a spoiler because it happens in like the first chapter, but the dad decides to send the younger daughter to marry the god king. And she was not prepared. She had absolutely no training. So she was just sent at the last minute to marry this menacing king, and she has no idea what she's doing, basically. So we have several different perspectives. One, of course, is the princess who was sent off to marry the god king. And it was really interesting to watch her take on this new life that she was thrust into without any training or experience whatsoever. And she is surprisingly stubborn and headstrong and intuitive, and she kind of figures this whole world out on her own, basically. And we find out a little bit more about this god king, who has been portrayed as this intimidating and menacing overlord who has this ultimate power. And so we find out a little bit more about him. And we also have the perspective of Vivenna, which is the older sister who was supposed to be sent off to marry the god king, but instead she was kept. And we see her as she travels to this kingdom to try and save her sister, because she knows that her younger sister was not prepared for this and most likely will not survive this these circumstances that she was put into. And then we have one of my absolute favorite characters and perspectives that I got from this book, and that is the character Lightsong. And he is actually one of the gods. So this kingdom that is ruled by the god king, it is basically made up of other gods. And in order to become a god, you have to have died performing some brave act or selfless act, and then you come back as a god. But the thing about these gods is that they're not exactly immortal unless they are, every week they have to feed on breath. And everyone, or most everyone in this kingdom, has these breaths, and they're just like pieces of life that they hold inside them. I'm not explaining this very well, but in order for a god to remain immortal, they have to feed off the breath of a child or a person, a regular human. And it's considered an honor to give your breath to a god. So it's not something that they're taking without permission. People are chosen and they volunteer, and they are compensated very well to give their life to a god, but that's how they retain their immortality in this world. And Lightsong is just the most hilarious and witty, and he has this dark humor, and it's just so fun to watch him live his life in this world, because when you come back, you don't have the memories of your old life. So he has no idea how he became a god or what he did the people in his past life, and that's just started to really weigh on him, because this world is all he knows. He's a god and he does whatever he wants. He commands a lot of people and can get whatever he wants, and I think that starts to bore him. So he's trying to, figure out the purpose of his new life as a god and maybe uncover some of the mysteries of his past. So I really, really enjoyed this book. This is actually supposed to be a series as well, so it ends kind of you can tell at the end that there is going to be more, and I know Brandon Sanderson has the intent to come back and finish this, and I hope he does really soon, because I would love to see more of these characters. And also in February, I picked up the conclusion in the Folk of the Air trilogy, which is The Queen of Nothing. I think I liked this more than I liked The Cruel Prince or The Wicked King. I think the plot was a little bit more entertaining. The action was a little bit more driving than the first two books. So like the first two books, I didn't really like the relationship in here. I get that it's kind of entertaining from going from like a hate to love type relationship, but I just didn't feel they had a lot of chemistry, and there wasn't really any build up, and I really prefer usually a slow burn, and I like a lot of like tension and angst before getting to the love part of a hate to love relationship, and I just didn't see a lot of that. So this was very entertaining, and I really feel like if I had read this trilogy when I was younger, like reading The Hunger Games or Twilight, like if I had read this series around that time, I would have eaten it up. Like I would have loved it. So I really think that this series did what it wanted to do. It was very entertaining. The world building I really loved. Like Holly Black did a great job creating this mystical fairy world, and the culture was very entertaining as well. So I enjoyed it. I don't think it's one that I'm just gonna like go back to and read again. But I liked it for what it was. Also in February, I read book 3 of the Wheel of Time series, which is The Dragon Reborn. I have mixed feelings about book 3 because there were parts that I really enjoyed and then parts that I just wasn't happy with. The plot, first of all, I kept having to go back and review what had just happened because I guess I just like skimmed over some parts and forgot some parts, so it just wasn't very gripping like the first two books were for me. But I did appreciate that we got more of the side characters. Like we got more time with Perrin and with Mat and with Egwene. I really appreciated that because I love the side characters. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of Rand for the most part, but I wanted to get out of Rand's world for a minute and get into these side characters because I love the side characters. So I did appreciate that, and I feel like this was just kind of not a filler book really, but building up to later books. And I've heard that book 4, The Shadow Rising, is one of the best in the series. So I'm really excited to pick up the next book, but this one I just didn't enjoy as much as the first two. So I'm interested to see how much I enjoy The Shadow Rising next. Another book I read in February was Beartown by Fredrik Backman. I have a lot to say about this book, and I don't think I'm going to do it right now. I might make a separate video for this because it was so impactful and amazing. This is the second book that I've read by Fredrik Backman, and then I went and got like all of his other books because I just love his writing style. I love that he writes contemporary books about important topics. Beartown is set in a very small town that just revolves around the hockey team. They don't have a lot going on in the town, so everyone is kind of consumed with the hockey teams in the town. So they have like different age groups, and they're very well known for one of their teams going really far and going like to the championships. I'm not a hockey person, so I really couldn't follow some of those parts, but it's not so focused on hockey that you have to be knowledgeable about it, because that's just kind of the setting. So the people in this town are very consumed with the hockey teams, and we have several different perspectives, which is something that I loved about this book. I don't think it would have been as impactful if we had not had all the perspectives that we were given in this book. So in this book, we are almost done with the hockey season. They have come so far in their season, and they have won a lot of games, and they're getting ready to go to like the championships. And they win the game before the championships. And one night the team is having a party, and a rape happens. And the aftermath of this rape and the accusations, and the lack of witnesses, it creates such chaos in the town because, I won't say too much, but someone who is accused is on the hockey team that is about to go to their state championships. A lot of people are questioning the accusation. Did it really happen? If it did happen, do we even make something of it? Because this is our hockey team, this is our life. And because we get the perspective of the victim of the rape, and we also get the perspective of the rapist and their family members, and the victim was connected to the hockey team as well through her father. I mean, you just get to see everyone's thoughts about this and their experiences. And I just think that this book is so important and should be read by so many people. I teach To Kill a Mockingbird because I teach 9th grade English, and if we weren't out of school, I was planning to take this book to my class and read some excerpts from it, because it's kind of like the polar opposite of To Kill a Mockingbird. Instead of someone who is falsely accusing a man of rape, this one is a woman who is accusing someone of rape, and not a lot of people are believing it. So this book was just incredibly written, so important. The characters were so well developed, and I definitely want to read more Fredrik Backman. So I know this video is going to be a little bit longer, so I'm going to try and shorten my summaries and kind of descriptions of the books so that I can make this not a 40-minute long video. The last book I read in February was The Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson. This is the first in, I think it's the Remnant Chronicles, and it's a trilogy, a young adult fantasy. And I picked this up because one of my favorite booktubers, Murphy Napier, has mentioned this trilogy on her channel several times. She says that yes, it is the tropey and kind of cliche fantasy young adult trilogy that we know, but she says that this main character, who is named Leah, has to make some really difficult decision and really develops over the course of the trilogy. So I had mixed feelings about this first one in the series because it doesn't really feel like a fantasy to me. It just feels like it's set in like a medieval European setting. It doesn't have a lot of magic, and whenever it talks about the magic that's set in the world, it's very vague and kind of all over the place and confusing. This first one in the series is very focused on the love triangle. Yes, a love triangle. And that's pretty much all this first one is based on. So after I finished this, I was not very hopeful, but I decided to continue with the series, and I finished the second one that I'll get to in just a minute. Now we are into March, and so far I've read 6 books in March. Obviously there's still a week left, and I am in the middle of 3 books right now, so hopefully I'll make it to 9 books in March. But I decided to, and I probably should not have done this, but I did. So I picked up Ash Princess by Laura Sebastian. I picked this up because one of my other favorite YouTubers, Elliot Brooks, says that this is one of her favorite YA fantasy series. And I probably shouldn't have picked it up around the same time that I picked up the Remnant Chronicles, because they have somewhat similar aspects, not too many, but I probably shouldn't have read them at the same time because I've done a lot of comparing, and that's not always the best way to read a series, I think. When I'm reading several books at the same time, I usually try to pick up ones that have completely different settings and characters and even genre. But anyway, I did it. I picked this one up. So Ash Princess, and it is incredible. I am almost done with book 3 right now, and this is a trilogy, and the premise of this book is so dark and so interesting. It is about this princess of a kingdom that is no longer in existence because it was taken over by another empire, and a lot of her family and a lot of her citizens were killed, and she was kept as basically a hostage because the king of the empire that took over her kingdom wanted to quell any possible rebellions from coming back up and trying to take over. So anytime that they had a problem with rebels from her old kingdom, they would just publicly whip or beat her, and that would stop any rebellions. So that has been her life from the time that she was very young. She's living with the people who killed her family, and she's learned that the only way that she is going to survive is by doing what she is told. And it's just really sad to see at the very beginning, because she's lost all of this hope until a reminder from her old life comes up and you start to see that spark in her of hope, and she realizes that she might have a little bit more influence than she thought, because she is the basically queen of this kingdom that was defeated. So this is just her kind of finding her identity and trying to pick up the pieces of the kingdom that was destroyed. And it is incredible. It's so dark for a YA. I was surprised because some of it is so dark, but I like that. It's very well written. The writing is descriptive in that it puts you in the world and the mind of the characters, but it's not so flowery and descriptive that it's just wasting time. Like, everything that I read had a purpose, so I didn't feel like my time was wasted. And that's something that I did feel with the Remnant Chronicles. Like, some of those scenes and some of the descriptions, I was just like, okay, why are we here? Let's move on. So after reading the Mistborn trilogy, which I recommend that everybody picks up because Brandon Sanderson is the master of magic systems, I saw one of my other favorite booktubers. I get a lot of recommendations from BookTube. So I saw Catherine Reeds recommend that everyone pick up Brandon Sanderson's short story, The Mistborn Secret History. And I think that this short story is actually in Arcanum Unbound, but I wanted to just pick this one up because I haven't read the Stormlight Archive yet, and I know that there are some spoilers in Arcanum Unbound for the Stormlight Archive. So I just picked up The Mistborn Secret History, and honestly, I went into this expecting that it was a backstory for Kelsier. Maybe it went to Kelsier's life before, you know, the rebellion, and maybe with his wife and his brother, but that is not what I got. And I was so pleasantly surprised with what this was. And I don't want to say anything about it because that would be spoiling the entire trilogy, but I put so many things together that were kind of left unfinished in the series because of this short story. And it was so fun making those connections and seeing those moments where I was like confused and wondering, okay, how did that just happen? Those things were solved in this short story. So I really, really enjoyed this kind of addition to the Mistborn trilogy. So then I picked up the second book in the Remnant Chronicles, which is The Heart of Betrayal by Mary E. Pearson, and I did enjoy the second book much more than the first. This one is set in a different place. We've kind of moved away from just focusing on the love triangle and the love interest. And she kind of has to trick the people around her into thinking that she's something she's not. And so I really enjoyed that aspect because she is doing a lot more to try and escape where she is. And I really enjoyed the setting of this book because she is in a place that is filled with people that she believed to be savages. Like, her kingdom has portrayed them as complete murderous savages. And it's really interesting to get to watch as she discovers that maybe they were wrong about that. And she is in a whole new culture and seeing a people that she considered to be less than. But those people are actually having to take care of her now. So I really did enjoy this second one, and hopefully, I haven't picked up the third yet, but I'm about to. I'm hoping that I will enjoy that as well. Also in March, I have picked up Lady Smoke, which is the second in this Ash Princess series by Laura Sebastian. And again, I loved the second one in this series. Usually I find that in a trilogy, the second book has middle book syndrome because it's just kind of a filler and it's a build up to the last in the series, but I did not find that this was just filler or just a build up to the last book. Like, so much action happened in this book and it was entertaining from start to finish. And I really enjoyed the main character's arc over the first book and the second book. Like, I don't want to say too much to spoil, but at this point she is learning how to be a leader, and she is trying to figure out how to go from being this submissive hostage to trying to find the queen and the leader in herself. And she doesn't really have confidence in herself yet, but she's trying to find that. And this series does have a little bit of romance, and it does even have like kind of a love triangle. That part's kind of, it's hard to classify as a love triangle, but it does have romance in it. But the great thing about this is it's not in the forefront of the plot. Like, you know, it's there, but it's not important, which I really appreciate because this is just about the politics and trying to overcome the people who took over her kingdom, and trying to figure out who she is and how she can use her experiences as a hostage of this empire to figure out a way to take back what she lost. One thing that's really interesting is that she tries to figure out how to be a queen based on her mother, and she didn't have a lot of time with her mother, who was the queen, but she tries to kind of figure out how to imitate her mother and be the queen that her mother was. But she finds that in this time of war, she can't just be, you know, this peaceful, loving queen. She has to figure out a way to use the anger that she developed as a hostage to take back her kingdom, and that she can't just be what her mother was. She has to become something new in order to save her kingdom, which is really interesting. And I am in the middle of the third book right now, and it is amazing, and I love this series so much. I gave the first two books 5 stars. And the next book that I picked up in March was The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch, and this is the first in the Gentleman Bastards trilogy or series. I think there's going to be more. But so many people on BookTube have read this series and loved it so much. I was very intimidated by it because it's not set in the kind of setting that I usually read. It is fantasy and there is some magic, kind of, but it's not focused around that magic and those fantastical elements. But nonetheless, I picked it up, and I will say that it took me about 200 pages to really get into this, because I mean, the first 200 pages were just kind of building up and giving your background and history, building up to the main plot points, and that's understandable, but it did take me a little longer than I expected to get into the book. I will say that I love the formatting of this book. It is told in like flashbacks, and then it goes back to the present timeline, which I really loved that, because you got to see the characters as adults and as these professional thieves, and you also got to see them as kids while they were learning the skills that they used as professional adult thieves, if that makes sense. And I really liked that the flashbacks were directly related to the next chapter that was in the present time. So like you'd have a flashback that explained how they learned this skill or when they were trained to do this, and then the next present chapter would be them using that skill. So I really enjoyed that, and there were a lot of twists and turns in this book that I did not expect, and by the end I was hooked and could not put it down. So I'm about to pick up the second in this series, hopefully in April. So I'm really excited to see where the series goes. And the last book that I have finished in March was a very short one, and that was The Phantom of Menace, which is Star Wars written in Shakespeare form. And I did not know that this existed, and if you did not know, then you need to go pick it up if you're a Star Wars fan, because it's incredible. I actually saw this on Catherine Reed's channel. She read it and really, really enjoyed it, and I'm an English teacher, so I love Shakespeare, and I've read a lot of Shakespeare, and I also love Star Wars, so this is just something that I had to pick up. And so this is the first one, and I really, really enjoyed seeing the Star Wars movie written in Shakespeare form. It was very witty, very entertaining, and some of the characters, the way that they speak in Shakespeare form just makes it 10 times funnier than it was in the movie. So I'm about to pick up the second one, and I really, really enjoyed this. So since it is not yet the end of March, I have a couple books that I'm hoping to finish this week because I do have more time. And the first one is the first in another series. I actually don't have the dust jacket for this because I take them off when I read them, and I left this at home. But the first one is The Keeper of the Lost City by Shannon Messenger, and this is the first in her series. I think she has 8 books out now, and there's supposed to be 10 if I right. I think there's supposed to be 10. But this is a middle grade series that is about a young girl who was raised in the human world, and one day she discovers that she is actually not human, but she is Fae. So she is taken to the Fae world and discovers that she has an incredible power that is not very common in the Fae world. And there are a lot of mysteries that are built up in this first book, and you're trying to figure out kind of what everyone knows that you don't. And I love following main characters who are new to a world, because you are kind of getting to learn about the world along with the main character, so that makes the world building a lot easier instead of just having like constant info dumps. But this is really entertaining, and I am almost a third of the way through, so I will hopefully finish this week because it's a very fast read and it's very entertaining. And the second book that I am hoping to finish this week is Ember Queen by Laura Sebastian, and this is the third in the Ash Princess trilogy. I think that's what it's called. This just came out recently. I think it actually came out in February, and I am a little over halfway through, and I think this is a brilliant conclusion. The one thing that I really love about this series is that the magic has developed throughout the series. It starts off as something that is just, it doesn't seem significant, you know about it, it's present, but as the series goes on, the magic becomes more significant and you learn more about it, and it becomes a much more important part of the plotline, which is very interesting and something that I'm still learning about as the series continues. I am also very impressed because the characters in this series have developed so much over the series, not just the main character. Like, I don't really like series where you have a lot of development in the main character's personality and then the side characters are flat and just stay the same throughout the entire series. That is not the case with this. The side characters have changed and their arcs are very significant throughout the series, which is really, really good. I'm hoping to finish this week, and hopefully I can include it in another video where I tell you guys more about the series. And finally, the last book that I'm hoping to finish in March is, of course, The House of Earth and Blood, which is the first in the Crescent City series by Sarah J Maas. And I will say, I know a lot of people find this controversial, but I am a Sarah J Maas fan. The Throne of Glass series was kind of the first thing that got me into high fantasy, and I love the series for what it does. I see the flaws in it. I haven't read her A Court of Thorns and Roses series. I don't know if I will. I know that kind of makes me like not a true fan or something, but I just don't know if I will find that as enjoyable as The Throne of Glass. This book is really heavy. It's like 800 pages, so it's a chunky one. But I was really excited to pick up this new series because it is an adult fantasy series. And I knew, because of the end of the Throne of Glass series, I knew that Sarah J Maas was going to get to explore more adult content because she did that at the end of the Throne of Glass series. So I expected that. So this does have a little bit more adult content than her other series did, but it is an adult fantasy. So I'm only a third of the way through. I'm hoping to finish it this week. It is very entertaining. It's kind of an urban fantasy, but it's not set on Earth. Like, it's a completely different world. It has like technology and computers and cars, so a lot of things that we have now is what they have in their world. So it's in a modern setting, and it's also kind of like a murder mystery. So our main character is half human, half fae, and she is not very high on the hierarchy in their culture. Something that I did like that Sarah J Maas did with this is that she included a lot more diversity in the races. Like, she has vampires and werewolves and witches and fae and like all different kinds. So that's not something that I've seen previously in her books. But someone who is only half human, half something else, is not very high on the totem pole in their society. So it's interesting to see a main character who doesn't have like a significant power or ability. Our main character, and this is not a spoiler because it's given in the description, her best friend is murdered at the very beginning of the book, and she is tasked with the assignment of trying to track down her friend's murderer because they thought that it was one person, but it actually turns out that it is not that person. And she has to team up with this kind of fallen angel who is basically a slave to higher archangels, and he is very well known for his ability to kill. She has to team up with this angel. His name is Hunt Athalar, and they have to find the murderer because this person is actually killing more people in their city. I have enjoyed it a little bit so far. I find some things were a little problematic. For example, there are a lot of info dumps and they feel kind of chaotic, and they really pull me out of the book because like a new person will walk in and then Sarah J Maas will describe their entire culture in one paragraph, and so it's just kind of chaotic. But hopefully we will get out of the info dumping portion of the book and move into the murder mystery plot, and I am hoping that I will love this just as much as everyone else has seemed to. So I'm excited to get finished with this week. So guys, that is all for my books read in February and the first little part of March. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.